Welcome back. This is the final portion of our forum today, but a very important one. We have two amazing speakers, but we're going to begin first by my introducing Dr. Anthony Lohman, who is Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, and we appreciate his time in being here for this forum and for all the support that he has given to the Social Behavioral Security and Law Enforcement Cannabis Center and to the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So thank you, Dr. Lohman, and I will hand this over to you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me here, and I know I'm in the middle of a great day of programming between a couple great panels today and a couple wonderful speakers. So I won't take too much of your time, but I do want to thank everybody for coming out here today. I love to see the students here. This is great. You're here to see this through. In my role, I oversee the academic programs, and I was just mentioning to one of our speakers that as we think about new industry and new tech, new workforce, new businesses that are going to drive the economy in New Jersey, I hear first and foremost wind energy, and it's got a cachet. It's green. Everybody wants to be a part of it. But this area, I think, has the potential. Cannabis really has the potential to hit so much more. It's human health. It's business. It's policy. It's chemistry. It's manufacturing. There's so many areas that this is going to touch on, and it's going to drive so much of our economy and create so many of the future jobs that we probably haven't even thought of. And the students in the room today, you're probably going to be doing those jobs. So I think it's very exciting. We have great efforts that seemed easy. If we think chemistry, manufacturing, engineering, even the business side, those things come natural. They're obvious to people where those jobs are going to be. But I have to give kudos to Dean Amar and everybody for Chess for stepping up when we talked about this. We talked about this, I want to say 3 years ago, right as we were coming into the pandemic. How can Rowan lead? And when we put together the first team, it was the medical schools, it was the engineers, it was the scientists, and it was even business. And I said, okay, well, why don't you come? Because she gets her way into everything. And there was no obvious thing, but we watched over the next year or two how the college, the faculty, everyone stepped forward and really developed something that we said, wow, suddenly Rowan can not only lead in these other areas, but now we can lead in policy, now we can lead in policing, now we can really help drive what does it look like as we roll this out in the state of New Jersey. So I'm glad that we listened and were patient and supported the initiative, and I can tell from the speakers we have today that we're on the right track on where we need to be. So thanks for having me. Thanks for all the great work. Thanks students for taking the time to really be interested and be the future leaders in this area. So this industry is going to be on you. So pay attention, and we can't wait to see what you do. So thank you.
Well, one of the things as we are thinking about the very first forum that we have done on cannabis and understanding the implications of cannabis that really amazes me is the speakers that we have had come to this panel to educate us, to think about this in ways that we perhaps never thought about it. We've been very fortunate, and I am really proud to be a part of this, and I'm very, very pleased also to introduce our first keynote speaker, Mr. William Caruso, and we thank you so much for taking the time. I know time is sometimes very hard to get, but we appreciate your being here, and we look forward to hearing you. William Caruso, I'm going to put on my glasses because I can't see to save my life. William Caruso is a cannabis policy expert and is one of the most venerable voices of New Jersey's cannabis debate. He has spent the past 15 years reforming New Jersey's marijuana laws, from medical to decriminalization and legalization. He is the chair of Archer's Law, Cannabis, and Government Affairs Practices. He represents New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform and is a New Jersey Cannabis Business Association board member. And it is our pleasure to invite Mr. Caruso to the podium.
So So I have about 4 hours of remarks prepared here. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm starting my timer to make sure I stay on message. First and foremost, it's an honor to be here. All these wonderful accolades and thank yous. I'm just a guy that showed up here in South Jersey. I've worked in government for a phenomenal amount of time. I'm a very lucky person. I'm happily married. I live here with my wife and 3 children, 16, 14, 12. That is why I have gray hair. The 16-year-old gets his driver's license next week. It's going to be a very scary time in our family. But it relates back to this and all those neat things that I've been involved in. I'm 48 years old. I've been alive for this entire transition to this experiment. And I'm going to stand in front of you today because one of the reasons I got involved in this was to change the stigma around this medicine, this drug, this plant, whatever you want to call it, and whatever you're dabbling with for your use, whether it's personal use, whether it's recreational use, whether it's medical use, whatever it is. I got involved in this. Primary focus was to change the stigma. I am a cannabis user. I have been a cannabis user for a fairly long period of my life. I'm a productive member of society. You can go read about it. I don't have to sit here and tell you, but there's a stigma attached to people that smoke pot, that they're dumb, they're lazy, they're not going to amount to anything, they're weird, their mind isn't right, they're crazy people, they're not what you want in terms of success. Now, there is a distinction between whether or not adults should have access to this, whether it's for recreational purposes or for medical, and whether children should. And I say this to you as a pretty decent father. Don't ask my kids, they will not validate that. But pretty decent father, pretty decent parent, that there is no place in my parenting for my children to have this available to them. But they were. When we started this experiment, it was easier for my kids to go up to the soccer field and get pot than it was for them to get a case of beer. In fact, we had a situation in our town, the high school my child goes to now, where a police intervened because someone was trading, a minor trading marijuana to an adult to get beer, because they couldn't go get the beer, but they could get access to the pot. Our system was broken, okay? So a lot of this, for me, was derived from looking at insane policies that weren't working here in my backyard, in my state, and looking at what other states had done in this wild experiment and realizing that they were successful. And the other side of this, which our federal government is completely broken right now, and we'll talk about that at the back end of this discussion, is we are telling children that marijuana, heroin, meth, cocaine, they're all the same. They are not all the same. And kids are smart. I'm telling you, I'm dealing with this. And I see people nodding out here because you deal with it. Kids are smart. And they understand that we're lying to them about certain things. And that's dangerous as well because there is a huge distinction. So, my background here, I had the pleasure of serving as a staffer, graduated up through the ranks to Congressman Rob Andrews. Rob was a representative for the 1st Congressional District. I started as the peon that carried the clipboard behind him and would come to events like this when he would speak, and I'd sit in the back and probably hang out with my friend over there. But I grew up there, and I remember sitting in the car when we would be driving to where we'd be going, and this topic would come up. California just legalized medical marijuana in 1996. We would talk about this, and he was against this. Good Democrat, common sense, but against this because of the stigma. What changed for Andrews around 2000 was the advocacy of Jim Miller and his late wife, Cheryl. Jim took his wife to Congress and wheeled her around in a makeshift gurney from door to door in congressional offices. My job was to meet them at the door and say, I'm sorry, sir, you and your wife don't have an appointment and we can't get you in today. And he made a huge scene about it, as you probably would, because he had gone from New Jersey all the way down to Washington. He wasn't a constituent. I was the flat catcher. That was my job. Rob actually kind of got wind of this as this was going on, pulled me aside, said, hey, what's going on? I told him there's a man with his wife. She's a medical marijuana patient. I know you're not into this. He actually said, well, bring him in. I don't have to vote for a little bit. Let's sit down and talk to them about it. I at least want to hear them. I don't want them sent away. where they were at every other congressional office. Okay, you're the boss. We sat down, he skipped 2 votes, in tears that day changed his position. This is the power of the advocacy that we hear about, but we don't always see. We don't see those results. We hear people that are frustrated with government, they're frustrated with certain positions, they've tried to use their power as citizens to change. This man did it with his wife, I mean, at an extreme level, and convinced a United States congressman with, my view, the wrong rules, but I'm just a staffer, the wrong views of this. Rob Andrews went on a letter to his colleagues saying, I was wrong. He promised the 2 of them that he would write that letter. He sent it out to his colleagues and said, I'm changing my position on medical marijuana, and became an advocate. That was the beginning for me of realizing that we can change hearts and minds on this. And that the power of real advocacy, the power of fact-based advocacy, the power of taking medical patients and utilizing the power of their personal stories to tell this tale. Fast forward, I left my employee with Congressman Andrews. I had the pleasure of working for 2 different Assembly speakers, Assemblyman Joe Roberts, Speaker Joe Roberts, and our state's current Lieutenant Governor, our state's first African-American female speaker, Sheila Oliver. I served as the top staffer, the executive director of the New Jersey Assembly for both of them. We passed the state's first medical marijuana law. I helped to write that law. I'm not an advocate in that space. I'm a staffer. I'll dabble a little bit. My friend here, who is also a phenomenal staffer, he is a leader, but we're not really able to advocate all the time. That's not our role, okay? We have to check the advocacy at the door and do the work that we're asked to do. Implementers is really the role that we play in a lot of places. I was proud to be an implementer on that bill. It wasn't perfect. This was in 2010, okay? 2009, 2010. It was at the end of Governor Corzine's term. Governor Christie inherited this law. It was not implemented for some period of time. There were some challenges to convince that governor that he would implement the law of the previous governor that was signed, and on a very unpopular topic. Fortunately, the law was implemented. We had a nascent medical law that allowed some patients very sparingly coverage. We had a very small amount of operators in our state. There were 6 at the time. They were all nonprofit oriented, governed by the statute. And there really wasn't a lot of ingenuity or development or improvement in that space. Certainly there wasn't anything going on during that time to deal with the criminality, dealing with a lot of the racial social justice issues and the like. The law was stagnant, in my view, for what we were intending to help with. We had a lot more that we could have been doing at that time. Other states were building out their medical program. We weren't. We were also in a very difficult time period at that point where parents became caught between certain situations. For one, if you had a child that was qualified to receive medical treatment and medical cannabis, it was very difficult to obtain the type of medicine that would be given to a child. You're not going to hand a kid a joint and tell them to go smoke it, right? Edibles were few and far between if they even existed. There was something called lozenges, but they weren't very good. Tinctures were usually the way to go, but where you could get those, what the strength was, what would ultimately help in terms of the dosage, and then how the dosage was given. If you were institutionalized at a certain educational facility because you had severe developmental disabilities, the nurse on premises couldn't administer the medicine. The parent had to come do it in a parking lot. It was a broken system. And to some extent, it still exists as a broken system today. Thankfully, things changed. I'm not going to get partisan here, but we did achieve some reform under Governor Christie's watch. There were some medical relief legislation that was passed that allowed some relief that was granted, and I do applaud Governor Christie, who is not a big fan of this, remains not a big fan of this topic, to allow those bills to become law. He had his signature. But then things changed rapidly when Governor Murphy assumed the role of governor. Murphy was not an early adopter in this. I met with then candidate Murphy about this. In fact, on Valentine's Day, the year before he ran, he openly told me he wasn't really into this. This isn't his thing. He's more of a whiskey kind of guy, I think. But he understood the value, understood the need, and delivered on a lot of the promises that he said he would. One of them is sitting here. When the DOH, where this resided, kind of jumped into this space when Murphy took over, we saw significant reforms begin to happen. We saw incredible new changes in policy and how they were going about not only the patient access piece of this, which was really important and very beneficial, and a lot of streamlining, a lot of common sense things that happened without the legislature's involvement, right? This was all done because the regulatory effort was allowed under the current statute. And also staffing up and then actually putting together new opportunities to increase the quantity of licensees in our state, building out an industry, which is important because if we're going to help patients have access, we need to have places they can go, diversity of products, and bringing in new opportunities from companies that would bring expertise in this market. A lot of that has happened under DOH. It happened under Mr. Brown's leadership when he was there as executive director. And I've had the pleasure of working with him for a very long time. And he and his team really were the spark. Jackie Cornell, who was deputy commissioner at the time, who was really in charge of this, worked seamlessly. A lot of the innovation that we've seen come out of this medical space happened on their watch, and happened because the governor put the right people in, and then I was going to say Jesus take the wheel, but it was like Jeff and Jackie and others take the wheel and let it go. On the advocacy side, I jumped out of government. I decided I was going to go become a hack government affairs professional and use my legal degree in the real space. So I joined Archer, and my job at Archer was create the first government affairs firm, government affairs entity for the largest firm in South Jersey, the fourth largest firm in the state. We didn't have one of these. We didn't have a lobbying arm. And that was my mission. They hired me in 2013 to start it, build it, and that was the goal. That's it. That's all they wanted out of me. Go make money, go start this thing, go use your contacts and your abilities, and help us get DEP permits and help us get DOT permits and do all those things that you lobbyist guys do. Go into Trenton, help move bills, help stop bills. We stop bills too sometimes. Cool, that's what I do. I wasn't sure I was going to like this, by the way. I loved my old life. I loved being in government. I loved being in the middle of things. I loved, what's that line in Hamilton? I've never seen that. I'm sorry, but I know there's a line about you want to be in the room, right? Be at the table. I said this as a career goal of mine, that I wanted to be at the table when key decisions and policy and politics were being made for our state. I did it. I sat at the table when what are we at, $45 billion budget now? I was back there when it was still in the 30s. I sat at the table with the governor, the speaker, and the Senate president, and two other staffers, and we decided things for the state of New Jersey. They, the elected, did. We advised them, right? We provided that. I was tremendously fortunate to be at that table. And now it was time to go and get out of government, go do this. And we did. We grew to the third largest lawyer lobbying shop literally in a year. I did what I said I was going to do for this firm. I think that's important. I'm not bragging, because I think sometimes we're like, well, I know you told me to go do this, but I've got another idea. And now I want to do this over here. And we're like, okay, well, what is this? Well, this was, I want to go out and join with the ACLU, the NAACP, the DPA, Drug Policy Alliance, LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Action Partnership, NORML, all the acronyms, right? And I want to form an entity to go advocate for the legalization of marijuana on the grounds of racial and social justice. My law firm was like, I'm sorry, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on? And again, when you join a entity like a law firm, you belong to them to some extent. You don't sign your entire life away, but you're part of a community, a different one now. Their role is to represent legal clients and be profitable. I mean, it's not a secret, it's what they do. But for me, I needed more. I wanted more. I knew we could do more in this space, and this was something that I really felt I brought expertise to the table and an ability to jump in a newer space that wasn't as comfortable for me. Again, I'm used to sitting inside the room, not outside the room with my face pressed against the glass, banging on it, going, let's get us in the door. I became an advocate. And it's not an unnatural role. Lawyers are advocates. That's kind of my calling in my profession. But in my old life, I was an implementer, not an advocate. We can't be advocates. We've got to be neutral parties. Now I'm in. Now I'm on the field. And our goals were here to change hearts and minds. And I'm fortunate to have worked with some incredible people. We worked in a somewhat symbiotic relationship with government, but sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes we had to, push back on certain things that may have been coming out of the department, and that was a difficult time, right? We'd say, well, we don't agree with it that way. We think we should do this instead. This isn't going right. We would, try to take a tactful approach. We had a lot of difficulty sometimes working with our legislative friends and figuring out where their heads were or weren't on what they were trying to do. And we were close to the goal line so many times of getting the statutory change done, only to have the rug ripped from under us because hardened views. When I say ignorant, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean there's a lot of ignorance around this topic about, the sky is falling kind of stuff, as I called it, the reefer madness deprogramming that needed to occur. We took time and did that. We dug in on racial and social justice issues. I mean, there's clear evidence on the disparate treatment for black and brown communities on this matter as it relates to people that look like me. We dug into those issues. We weren't afraid to talk about those issues, but we also took people as they came. So you want to come for the money? Great, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the industry. Let's talk about all that's going to develop. You want to talk about the industry and the role you're going to play in that? Great, let's talk about that. You're not interested in buying cannabis. You don't want to have any role in this, but you think it's kind of stupid that we're locking people up. And I literally had an argument with somebody at a forum, not like this is a pretty informed group, but someone charged up after my panel discussion, said to me, I'm the devil incarnate. This is the wrong thing for society, blah, blah, blah. I run a business. I'm never going to be able to hire anyone now. And by the time we were done talking, we talked about the fact that people that were arrested 10 years ago need to get their lives back. My friend, Mr. Hoffman, is literally leading some of that charge right now to make sure people can get their lives back. If you were arrested 10 years ago because you were selling dime bags on the street, you can't work at Applebee's right now. What are you doing? These are problems that we decided we can solve, and we can take this message to a broad array of people. If you're never going to walk into a dispensary, if you're never going to use cannabis in your life, if you don't care about the tax revenue, do you care about getting those people right? Do you care about an expungement law that's going to basically say we should let everyone be able to reach their full potential? We shouldn't have to. If you don't want to be paying for people to be on the government dime, great. Let's get them off that. Let's get them jobs. Let's get them employed. Let's get them to be part of your workforce so they're not a liability. These were common sense messages that worked. And we built this movement, and we took people as they came. We sold this message on a broad array, and we won. We didn't want to go to the ballot. That wasn't the goal. It wasn't the goal to go move a constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana. I mean, of all the things you can be doing with amending our Constitution, this wasn't it. But it became the only pathway forward. And we won the largest vote share ever in the history of this state on a ballot question on this issue in the middle of a pandemic. It is literally one of the proudest moments I've had working with an unbelievable group of people. And I am privileged that my law firm allowed me to go do this because it's a complicated issue, right? To go tell a group of shareholders, hey guys, we're not going to make any money right now. That's not what this is about. We're going off on a very controversial topic. I'm a very public face for your firm. That's why you brought me in here, and I'm going to be over here now. And yeah, we had some problems. We had clients that basically said, what the heck are you guys doing? We also had clients go, hey, what the heck are you guys doing? We may be interested in that. And that, again, is part of the deal. That helped sell some of this inside. You've got to own both sides of this. You've got to be able to take people as they come. So let's talk about here, and let's talk about now, and let's talk about where we're going. We have succeeded in changing hearts and minds and winning this discussion here. So now we're in the game. These folks at the CRC have done an incredible job. And I'm going to throw some shade at our state government, but I want to, before I do that, give you guys just a little picture into what this miracle is right now. The legislature took its time to come together with a plan to implement the will of the people. The November 2020 ballot question wasn't enacted until the spring of 2021 because it took time for the legislators to kind of figure out what that all meant, which is shameful, but we're thankfully beyond that at this point. The CRC was seated in the summer of 2021. They had not met each other. They were all new commissioners from different parts. They had a skeleton crew of staff. They put out regs in August. They put their first license award out from a 2019 disaster that had been bottled up in the courts. They awarded that in October. They put the first licensing round out for the grow and cultivation round in December of that year. In March of the following year, they had the retail out, and they started awarding right after that. Where in the history of any level of government have you ever seen that level of efficiency? And I'm not saying that because he's here, because I said it the other night when he wasn't here. This is a miracle experiment. And we're not done yet. I'm stealing his line because he says it well. They're building the plane while they're flying this plane. But boy, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say to you, where we're going right now is really impressive. Where we're headed here is nothing short of miraculous from the standpoint of, normally bureaucracy is the excuse. They have cut through a lot of bureaucracy with a lot to do and a lot of new faces sitting around a table on a very controversial issue that is still illegal at the federal level. So today, where are we going? Well, the good news is this institution is built for what's about to come. You guys have phenomenal leadership. The president of this institution, I'm just going to give him a shout out. When I was the chief of staff to the United States Congressman, Rob Andrews had a vision of bringing $1 million federal appropriation to the city of Camden to create a tech incubator. The idea here was all that cool tech that's going on here and other places, it's not being developed by mad scientists in the basement of the DOD. It's being developed in people's garages and basements in private sector, right? The Steve Jobs of the world and all those folks. And the idea was, let's bring that to Camden with some federal research money. Well, unfortunately, there's another institution in this state with an R. They didn't want any part of it. They didn't know where Camden was on the map. It's too far south for them. Your leader, who was over at Drexel, decided to jump into this. Drexel came to Camden, brought an engineering team, and decided we're going to jump into this. That's the vision of an Ali Hushman. When the legislature decided, under the leadership of Steve Sweeney and some others, my friend Lou Greenwald, to change the way that Rutgers and Rowan interact with one another and create an unbelievable research institution here in South Jersey, your leadership was supportive of that. Your governmental leadership was supportive of that. That was no small feat, ladies and gentlemen. Some of that gray hair is not from the kids. Some of that is from that movement of trying to get that bill passed. It almost got scuttled. But here's the good news. The bones are here. You guys are ready. And what you're doing already is fascinating, but what you're about to be involved in is unending. I think next Tuesday the federal government is going to change hands. Those folks down there can't agree. Today is Thursday, okay? The problem in Congress right now is they just can't get along. Unfortunately, and I'm a Democrat strategist, I love my party, we confound things sometimes. We make things too hard. The federal government is derelict right now in its duty to uphold where we are with states in terms of their views on cannabis, whether it's medical, whether it's prohibition still, or where Jersey is building a market. The federal government is standing in the way of that. But what they're doing even worse is they're standing in the way of you all here realizing your full potential as a research incubator, the ability to develop unbelievable opportunities here, what I'll call in private business, in the innovative cannabis business space, but also on the medical side. And that's where I think we're about to come. So on the federal level right now, because we still have not descheduled this drug, because we still treat this like we do with heroin and cocaine, and because it is still illegal, we are not able to do medical research here in the United States, in research institutions like this. It's offshore right now. It's in Israel, it's in India. In fact, there's a group I was just talking to that's doing this in Jamaica, which I kind of want to go visit and explore for my own self. But we're not doing what we could be doing here. We're not advantaging ourselves of what we should be doing here. We actually have statutory opportunities available that we really haven't pulled down yet. Where I see us going in the short term now, once Congress acts, and I think that could come in lame duck, or it could come with a Republican Congress that I think is going to skinny down some of this safe banking and other things. We need everything right now. We need safe banking so that entrepreneurs that are coming out of the CRC right now, this craft cannabis economy that we're developing, an East Coast cannabis, craft cannabis economy, they should be allowed to succeed. They should be allowed to develop an industry. They should be allowed to develop, much like we see with craft beer and other things, their own market. That's not what I'm talking about here, though. What I'm talking about here is the ability for a 48-year-old man to walk into a doctor's office and say, I was laying on my back, I couldn't walk for 2 days, and I need medical treatment, and not be handed a prescription for opioids as the only excuse for my pain management. And then, by the way, when I get addicted to those opioids, be told, well, we're going to go into a bunch of failed programs that don't work, right? Why is cannabis not a pain management option? Because it is illegal right now. We don't have research, and doctors don't feel comfortable. Why is it not a step-down mechanism to get off of opioids to treat people? Again, because of these problems. The federal government has the ability right now to jump in and fix those problems. They have the ability to pass safe banking. They have the ability to allow an entrepreneur, black, brown, women-owned, veteran-owned, whoever it may be, to go into a bank and get a loan like a normal business would. We can't right now. But more importantly, they have the ability now to create a payer mix where there's going to be insurance coverage, Medicaid, Medicare, VA, private sector insurance, workers' comp, and health. And that's going to drive private industry now to partner with research, to partner with different types of entities to start developing the next drugs. Those will stay here. Those will develop here. Those have unbelievable abilities not only for public health, but also for industry and job creation. I'm excited about where we're going. I think we lose sight sometimes of the medical engine here and the research engine here. We're talking about, hey, when the gummies going to be available, right? Where are the consumption lounges? Those are all sexy and cool. But the real work, I think we haven't even scratched the surface on what's to come on the medical side. And I think the way that we're going to change not only the hearts and minds, which we're succeeded in doing, but the innovative way we're going to change people's lives in terms of how they're able to deal with pain, how they're able to deal with different challenges are presenting them. And by the way, the opioid scourge is still a scourge and still a problem we're dealing with. These have profound benefits, and the ability to create an unbelievably robust manufacturing base here, and I think South Jersey's built for this, and this institution is built for this, to be an incubator for the next Merck, the next major pharma companies that are going to come along and produce unimaginable opportunities here in our region. Now, one cautionary tale. I just said to you what the federal government can do. They can also come in and screw this all up. We have, and I talk clients out of this all the time because I don't have the confidence that the federal government isn't going to come in and screw this all up. We are building at a significant clip right now the ability to have grow opportunities. The way our world works right now is you can't import cannabis in from Colorado or Oregon or Mexico or Costa Rica or wherever else. At some point in time we will. At some point we're going to have interstate commerce, and I think more than likely it's going to be like how we get pineapples in here into the Port of Camden, right? The Del Monte chips them in, they ship them off, and it may not even be raw flour. It may be, we may be importing, the lifeblood of this industry is the cannabis oil, right? They derive oil from the cannabis flower, and then that's used for a lot of things. I don't want that to happen selfishly for New Jersey. I want to keep a protected market right now. We've built this, we're building it right now. I think that the goal would be, there's enough prohibition states out there that Congress can pass a law that would allow for states to continue operating and growing their own economies. At some point in time, though, this will move, and it will move deep south. It's cheaper, labor, energy, land. It's cheap and outdoor, grows for multiple seasons. Jersey really allows outdoor, but it's very difficult. This is the grow operations, other than Bouticos, my view is are most likely going to leave at some point in time. I don't think that's where the manufacturing base is going to be. And I'll submit to you two things. Progresso just closed its plant in the deep South Jersey, and some of that had to do with the global forces in the economy, but it was here. And Nabisco similarly had one, they just left. There's ways to keep those manufacturing companies here. There's some tools that EDA has and others, and we can do better on. But the high-tech manufacturing will stay because they want trained job forces. They want sterile environments. They want nexuses to research universities. Those things will likely stay if we build it here first. If we don't, it won't. And I think what the CRC is building out right now is that engine. The next companies we have a bunch that are here already that are rooted in the medical space, but hundreds more coming online. And the ability to establish those, the ability to give them the resources that are necessary to succeed and marry them up with what you all are doing here, that's the future. That will last whatever disasters happen at the federal level. And I'm heartened that we're actually at a place in time right now where a lot of these things are going to come due. And they're coming due for you all right now while you're here. You're in a great place. You're at the cusp of an unbelievable experiment really starting to come to fruition. And I think you guys are now the next entrepreneurs, the next business leaders, the next researchers, and the next people that I think are going to lead this effort in the industry space. And I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm a simple country lawyer now. I represent clients in this space, and I'm proud to do it. I do still advocate. I try to offer this type of conversation wherever I can go. But you guys are the next chapter of this. You guys are going to be the learned experts that are going to jump into this space now and derive the next magic medical cure. You're going to be the next crew that's going to come in and develop a new brand that is going to establish itself here on the East Coast. That is the exciting place that we're about to go, and I'm proud. I am proud to be associated with this group, proud to be here today in your company, and I'm really excited for what Rowan has to offer in this cannabis space. You guys are right at the tip of the spear right now, and I think it's the perfect place to be. I really do. And it has been a privilege to be here and share some thoughts today. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. And I'm going to stay, and I always want to hear what my friend has to say, but I'll be here if there's questions later. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. No pressure.
Yeah, you set me up well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso. That was really wonderful, and it was very informative, and we certainly do appreciate your being here. Last but certainly not least, we are really privileged once again to have, again, I'm dumbfounded by the speakers that have given so generously of their time and who have come here today to impart a lot of their expertise and wisdom on this subject and make us pause for thought about things that we maybe never thought about before. And you've heard the word CRC, you've heard that acronym, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Well, guess what? We have Mr. Jeff Brown, who serves as the executive director of the CRC, and he manages the staff, functions, and operations of this commission, which I'm sure is quite a task. And I can't even imagine your schedule. I know mine, yours must be horrible. Prior to being appointed to the position by Governor Phil Murphy, Jeff served as Assistant Commissioner at the New Jersey Department of Health, overseeing the Division of Medicinal Marijuana. Under his leadership, the Division of Marijuana expanded access to New Jersey patients, what Mr. Caruso was speaking about, increasing enrollment from 17,000 in early 2018 to more than 100,000 at the end of 2020, and tripling the number of dispensaries in operation. We are very fortunate to have, and I welcome Mr. Jeff Brown. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Thank you to the Dean. Thank you to Professor. Thanks, Bill, for the great setup there. So Bill inspired me. I wasn't actually going to talk about my personal story, but I'll share a bit since Bill shared a bit about his. And, before I was asked to come in and probably the year before I was asked to come in and join the Department of Health and lead the expansion of medicinal cannabis, some things happened that kind of educated me about what medicinal cannabis could do. And I have Crohn's disease, so it's an inflammatory disease of, essentially your bowels, intestines. It's incurable. It can be put into remission, but you have bouts where it comes back. It can be particularly painful. So the year before I came into the Department of Health, I was working in healthcare policy, and that was really my background, was healthcare policy, working to support the Affordable Care Act, working to implement that here in New Jersey. So that year before was when President Trump came into office, and one of his priorities was to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And from working in that space for about a decade, I knew what that could mean to people. What that could mean to people who gained coverage because of the Affordable Care Act, people who had pre-existing conditions who could now rely on coverage where they couldn't before. And so I got involved in advocacy on that point, even in addition to my day job, where I was fortunate to be an advocate, day to day. But I started volunteering for organizations that supported Crohn's and colitis patients, and I met, interestingly, through that work, I met a number of people who started telling me that they took the biologic drugs and they worked, but when they had bouts, what did they rely on? Cannabis. And I was living in Pennsylvania at the time, and they didn't have medical marijuana there, so these people were finding it, through what the CDC would call informal means, and they were using it. And I can't tell you how many people I met who talked, it was like, how do you manage your symptoms? Well, don't tell my doctor, but I'm purchasing marijuana, and that's helping me manage my pain. And I mention that because I don't know if I had that experience, if I would have been so open to taking the job with the Department of Health. I was really interested in focusing on reducing healthcare disparities, and what that taught me is that there is a healthcare disparity, and it's really access to this drug that helps people, medicinal marijuana, medicinal cannabis. So when then Commissioner Elnahal asked me to join the team at the Department of Health, I first asked my mom, and she said, "You know what I'd say when I say to weed? Just say no." She eventually voted for the referendum, by the way. So we made progress there. And I also talked to people who I consider mentors, friends, and across the board, they said, you need to take that job. That is an incredible opportunity to lead on a really important issue. So that was the first 3 years, focusing on expanding medicinal cannabis with, a really important and challenging, sidetrack into COVID response, which we all had to do at the Department of Health. But following that, following working on the expansion of medicinal cannabis, we turned sights to recreational, to adult use cannabis. And obviously that work had been happening in the legislature, it had been happening, in policy circles, but, and I like to, I'm an implementation guy as part of the executive branch. We're tasked with implementing the laws that are on the books. Certainly we provide feedback, when asked during the process to developing those laws, but, really my job is, what's the law? What are the regulations? That's sort of our playground. That's what we can work within. So following the passage and signing of the CREAM Act, a couple months later in April of 2021, we established the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. And the Cannabis Regulatory Commission is a 5-member commission tasked with establishing and regulating New Jersey's adult use cannabis market and continuing to expand access and ensure access for medicinal cannabis patients. And to do so, both of those in a safe and equitable manner. Our core values are safety and equity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I was going to start off with a bullet list, and Bill already ran through a bunch of it for me, so I appreciate that. But in the year and a half that we've been in existence, we've held over 20 public meetings. We drafted 261 pages of regulations, and that initially it was me and a regulatory officer, and then our chairwoman jumped in and helped out. And then as we got more commissioners, and I'll give a particular shout out to Commissioner Nash, who's not here, but Commissioner Nash is from South Jersey, and has done just tremendous work on the commission, representing not only her point of view, but certainly standing strong to the interests of South Jersey and the interest that she was appointed to. To that position. We also launched, after we adopted those regulations in August, we launched licensing for new businesses a few months later. We knew it was critical to get new businesses into this market. The law provides that medical companies could expand into the new adult use marketplace. That was something that was in the law that we have to do. We knew that what we wanted to do was create new opportunities for new businesses as soon as possible. So that's why we focused on getting our licensing system up and going. And as Bill mentioned, we started accepting for cultivation and manufacturing in December of 2021, and then March of 2022 for retailers. So here we are in November of 2022, and I can tell you that the Commission has now issued license awards to 801 conditional license applicants. So that's 801 businesses who've gotten an initial review, gotten a conditional license that allows them to move forward in the licensing process, go get municipal approval, go lock down a site, and then come back to us and apply to convert that to an annual license. At the last meeting on October 27th, the Commission approved our first standalone conditional conversion in annual licenses. So those are new businesses entering this market. 18 of them were approved at the last meeting. 10 conditional conversions and 8 annuals. The vast majority of those are either social equity businesses, something we defined in regulation, or diversely owned businesses. Social equity businesses are businesses that are either majority owned by somebody who has a past marijuana conviction, or majority owned by somebody who comes from what we termed an economically disadvantaged area. That's a zip code in the state with lower than average median household income, higher than average rates of health uninsurance, or a combination of the two. So 18 new awards, and that's going to, at our monthly meetings, that's going to be, we're just going to, I mentioned at the meeting, it's the tip of the iceberg. We have over 250 annual and conversion applications under review, and we'll continue to review and move those forward. Broadly speaking, our goals from day one have been threefold: shore up and expand access to medicinal cannabis, which we did by issuing 44 new awards for new medicinal cannabis businesses. I'll note the first new dispensary from that cohort came online. They had a soft opening. I think their grand opening is this weekend, but they're called Sweet Spot Dispensary, and they're in Voorhees. Our first cultivator from that cohort was permitted and became operational in April of this year. That's Hillview Med. They're in North Jersey. And we expect the openings there to only accelerate. And they're going to serve the medical patients first and foremost. We're still over 115,000 medical patients. We're seeing it come down a little since we've legalized, but still a lot of people getting access to medicinal cannabis. I mentioned beginning new business licensing. We knew we needed to create opportunities for new entrepreneurs. The medical industry, although given the ability to convert in the law, we knew that they couldn't support this market alone. And then work with that current medical industry to get them ready to expand while also caring for and maintaining access for medical patients. So from the start, we've really done this in an intentional manner. And really, that intentionality is around making sure that this cannabis market is as diverse as our great state. The regulations we put in place, the notice of application acceptance, which underpins our application process, they institute what's called priority review. So that basically allows for the social equity businesses that I just mentioned, diversely owned businesses, which are minority owned, women owned, or disabled veteran owned businesses, to get reviewed and approved before any other applications we get. We're doing rolling admissions, but we have that priority review in place so that social equity applicants, diversely owned applicants, they get reviewed first and approved first if they meet the criteria. We've focused on free access to information in a manner that's easy to understand. So if you go to our website, there's a pre-application webinar which explains our application process. There's our notice of application acceptance, which, it's a legal document. It is dense, but it's the roadmap to how we accept and review applications. And then there's a host of FAQs and other resources for would-be applicants to look at. Bill mentioned the 2019 RFA, and that's what led to those awards. And I'll tell you, after going through 2 RFAs at the Department of Health, one of the things that I said to my regulatory officer who's helping write the rules was, we're not doing any more RFAs. Because we learned and we looked at models of licensing from around the country, and at an academic institution, I'm going to get to sort of a call to action at the end here, but we did our research and we looked at what works and the pluses and minuses to each of them. And honestly, you don't see many states doing the RFA, the sort of big competitive bidding model anymore. You either have lotteries or you have rolling application acceptance like we have. big priority for me after living through those RFAs, after talking to applicants who went through those RFAs, understanding the challenges that they faced, was to make sure that we at the CRC are not an impediment to market access. We have our priorities, which are equity and safety, and we set up our priority review process to enable those to have a solid foothold in this market. But we also want to make sure that businesses have an opportunity to get into the market. And we've received at this point, I believe earlier today, we're creeping up to 1,400 applications. So it is, I will say, limited staff. I think we have 60 staff members now. It's going to take some time to get through all of them, but I'm proud to say that, but for 60 some odd applications that had an issue with how they applied as far as what priority they claimed they were, we've been through all of them, and they've either received cure letters and they know what they need to do to resubmit, or they're in process to head to our compliance and investigations team to start getting them implementing and ready for final licensure and ultimately approval by our board. We know we have an outside responsibility when it comes to making sure this is a diverse market, when it ensures it's an equitable market, because we've listened to stakeholders. And that's been the constant refrain from day one, is this has to be built on a bedrock of equity that started in what was advocates did in the legislature, and that carried through to what we did as we implemented this. And we're going to continue to look at how we're doing there. So one of the things that I pushed for that the commission did was create an office of data and business analytics. This is an office within the commission that's dedicated to collecting data on what we do, collecting data on this industry, and making sure that we have data points at our fingertips to make better decisions. We also, the law created the Office of Women, Minority, and Disabled Veteran Cannabis Business Development. That's a mouthful, so we shortened it in our org chart. It's the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. That's led by Director Wesley McWhite, who's an excellent leader in his own right. And that office is focused on making sure that we're living up to our promises and living up to that promise of equity and diversity in this industry. As Bill mentioned, just given the history that the criminalization of cannabis has brought, it's critical that we hold ourselves accountable to meeting those goals. So we began recreational sales on April 21st, 2022. Got a lot of flack. People said, why not 420? I can tell you as an operations guy, launching on 420 probably would have been a nightmare, particularly for patients. And so that's why that was off the table. But understanding that this was critical, 421, the day after, was the day that we launched. On 420, myself and the chair, we visited personally a couple of the dispensaries that were remaining medical only to thank them for their commitment to patients, and also to thank patients for it being a part of the program, and to express our commitment to them to make sure that they didn't get left behind. And we've done that. So in early May, following that launch, we issued over $300,000 in fines to 5 companies that didn't hold true to all the patient access provisions that we put them to when they were approved for expansion. Since then, there haven't really been, many major infractions, and I'm proud to say that, patients have access. At our last meeting, I encourage you to go to our website. You can see the slides there, but we did an in-depth pricing analysis to see how prices for patients have been affected by the recreational market. To look at prices in the recreational market and what's going on there. I can tell you we're still a high-price state in both. Prices in medicinal are still consistently lower than recreational. They've risen over the last 6 months, but less than the rate of inflation. So really not attributable to necessarily the launch of recreational cannabis. But we did see that before the launch, there were more discounts being provided to patients. And so the after discount average, we did see go up a little bit. So looking forward to our upcoming work, we're really focused on addressing challenges in the market. And this is something that the CRC can't do alone. We need help from entities in state government, from private industry, from private entities. But the three things I wanted to highlight, actually I'm going to highlight four things. So first, expanding access to capital for entrepreneurs. Because there is that prohibition at the federal level, traditional banking really isn't available in this industry. And that means that, it's really hard to get funding to fund a business. So it's not like you could go to the SBA. It's not like you could go to Wells Fargo to get a loan for this. I will tell you, we had to start a bank account as the NJCRC, not the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, because banks would not take our business as the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. That's the challenges of just having cannabis in your name. And on the business side, it's much, much worse. I mean, we're a regulatory agency. We're in but not of the Department of Treasury. So that's a key focus, and thanks to some legislative changes, we've been working with the Economic Development Authority to see what can be done to put some capital out there to help particularly small businesses succeed in this industry. This is one that's entirely outside our purview, so put it to the smart people at Rowan and other places to think about. But one of the big, and honestly, it's largely a federal issue, but entrepreneurs also face a lot of impediments to finding real estate. A lot of landlords won't work with them because they're in cannabis. New Jersey is a tough real estate market to begin with. So that's another. Educating municipalities to open up more opportunities for applicants. So we have our state licensing system. Each municipality under the law can also have their own local process for determining who gets local approval. And applicants need local approval to ultimately get our blessing, get our approval to operate a cannabis business. So we've been working to educate municipalities about what we're doing to ensure our licensing process is equitable, to help them understand what they can do to ensure their licensing processes are equitable. In fact, as I'm speaking right now, there's a municipal town hall going on, and they've been going on all week with municipalities to answer questions, share the resources that we have on our website, and connect them with our staff who can help them answer questions that they get from their constituents, that they get from cannabis businesses. Again, we need partners to succeed, and including and especially institutions of higher education and research. There's a growing body of research on cannabis, but it's still not enough, and this is changing, but it really falls into largely two categories. And of course, this isn't entirely true across the board, but you see mostly two categories. One, you have cannabis is bad, and here's why it's bad. The second is cannabis is probably helpful medically for this condition, and here's why. What we need is a C, and the C is cannabis is here, it's legal, and here's how we ensure it's safe, responsible, and equitable. And I wanted to share some examples of some like questions that we think about as policymakers where more research is needed. So when you look at the data on cannabis use, roughly 8 to 10% of cannabis users develop cannabis use disorder. Cannabis use disorder is, in fact, substance abuse disorder like any other. That number is slightly less than, or consistent with alcohol. It's less than opioids. So this is something that we see with drugs that can be intoxicating generally. 90%, that means roughly 90% of the people who use cannabis don't develop cannabis use disorder, can, do so responsibly. So for me, I'm thinking about, okay, so what can we do to equip the 90% with the right information that they need to use cannabis responsibly and to do so safely? And then what can we do to reduce that 10% even more? And people who do unfortunately fall into that 10% category, how do we identify them and get them the help they need as quickly as possible? When we're talking about products themselves, and Bill mentioned manufacturing, so manufactured products are extracts are becoming a bigger and bigger piece of cannabis markets across the country. I think that the safety issues that come up with these products, particularly from what the CDC called informal sources, was really highlighted before COVID when we had EVALI, vaping-related lung injury, and people were essentially experiencing mass traumatic events in their lungs from using vape cartridges that were made using vitamin E acetate. So vitamin E acetate is out. It's not really allowed anywhere in any market. Interestingly, thinking on vape cartridges has changed. I think before E-Valley, everybody was focused on we should limit potency, we should limit potency, we should limit potency. Now it's like, well, okay, so if you limit potency, then there's more stuff going into that vape, and are we sure that all of it is it all truly safe? Vitamin E acetate is out, but certainly there are other additives that are used. Research is needed on all of those things, and how, by the way, not only the ingredients, but how they react at different temperatures. So, there are certainly cannabis consumers who dab, and dabbing is essentially a way to use extracts in particular, where they heat them to very high temperatures and then inhale them. When we were doing research around E-Valley, and I'll say in our rules, you can see that we limited, so for retailers that sell vape batteries, so those are essentially what you put a vape cartridge in to heat it and vaporize it. We limited the temperature that batteries could be heated to 500 degrees. The reason we did that is because we found research during E-Valley that showed, and it was one study we found, but it was amazing. They showed that terpenes, which are naturally occurring in cannabis and other they're in citrus. There's what give lemon their scent. They're what give pine tree their scent. When they're heated to extremely high temperatures, they can break down into potentially harmful substances. And so that's something we need to understand more. What happens to, cannabinoids themselves? What happens to terpenes as they're heated to very high temperatures? These are things that where more research is needed. When we talk about, sort of the broader public, and getting back to prevention, I think schools, workplaces, parents, they need evidence-based, tested practices for deterrence and prevention. That's going to be critical. As regulators, we need that. And I can tell you, when I look around, there's a lot of resources on, okay, this is why you shouldn't use cannabis. Has any of it been tested? Is there any data behind what's most effective for what particular group? I can find the messages, but I can't find the data showing what is most effective for a particular consumer segment, particular group in the population. We need an expanded commitment to medical research here in the Garden State, and I can tell you some of that is on us at the CRC. We have some permits that we need to start moving on, called clinical registrant permits, which will allow academic medical centers to partner with the industry to conduct research. There's also a permit type, an integrated curriculum permit, which allows institutes of higher education to partner with industry actors on any number of research projects or even workforce development. On the business side, we need research on how to produce cannabis in an environmentally friendly way. The production of cannabis, particularly indoors, is a very resource-intensive process. And I like that, wind was brought up earlier because, we're making tremendous strides in New Jersey to create a green economy. And so with that, let's make sure that this green economy is green as we move forward with this as well. And so, looking at indoor cultivation, looking at ways that we can save resource utilization when it comes to water, when it comes to light. From day one, we built in the ability for outdoor cultivation. Looking at ways to cultivate outdoor and still provide efficient yields. I was talking to a cannabis grower in Vermont, and he specifically said South Jersey, he brought up South Jersey. He said South Jersey's climate, he thought if you did a combo of indoor and outdoor grow, you could get maybe four or five harvests in a single growing season. Now, you could probably get more indoor, but that's still significant. And it's not, I think a lot of people just think they have to plant and then harvest at the end of the season. There's in fact tactics that you can use, practices to make outdoor cultivation efficient. And that's something that, because outdoor using the sun's natural light to grow your cannabis, using the soil, there's nothing more environmentally friendly than that. And then lastly, it's kind of funny, there's so much focus on what we're doing at the CRC and what we're doing with the legalization of cannabis here in New Jersey. And in 2018, the federal government passed the Farm Bill, which legalized hemp. Now, hemp is the exact same plant as cannabis, the exact same plant. And if you go to a hemp field, it's all being grown for CBD, for extracts. Looks very similar to exactly what you're going to see in the cultivation sites that we regulate. There's a lot of stuff going on at the federal level or not going on at the federal level related to that. I'll tell you, you go to gas stations that advertise as smoke shops and you can go in and there's 100 milligram Delta 8 gummies being sold behind the counter. We limit, Delta 8 is intoxicating. It can provide psychoactive effects, not as much as Delta 9, but it can provide effects. Now, thankfully, we've worked with the Department of Agriculture here in New Jersey to make sure that none of that is coming from New Jersey licensed hemp producers, and I can tell you that it's not. But it's federally legal, so it is able to be sold across state lines. We need researchers to look at that. And the thing is, I mentioned Delta 8. Chemists are developing new modifications to cannabinoids. So there's Delta 8, now there's THC-O acetate, there's Delta 10 THC. There's even more on the horizon. And so, we need to look at those and understand their safety, understand, what effects that they have. So there's a lot of opportunity for research here. There's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. I am very thankful that I was invited to this event, that I could participate. Thank you to Rowan. Just know that at the CRC, we're committed to moving forward this industry in a way that's safe and equitable, but also we want to be data-driven and we want to be focused on making the best decisions that we can. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? This gentleman as well.
Quick, I graduated from the master's program in Maryland for medical cannabis and science and therapeutics. And for a job now, I work with a small company that's on the software side of the cannabis industry. And actually, I do compliance, so I look at state regulations all over the country. We have some of the best in the country by far. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Because I look at all of them. It's sound now. It's a totally different world. And what we have here, other people I talk to, some of even my classmates in like Georgia and North Carolina, South Carolina, they're complaining about the regulation of which they have very few, and the ones they do have are stringent. So my response to them is, come on, move up here to New Jersey. We're good. We got it. And I can, based on comparisons, give you evidence to prove it. So I just wanted to let you know you're doing a fantastic job.
You're still hiring?
We are.
You probably don't hear that much.
No, thank you.
Does the research. It's a great program.
I greatly appreciate that. And even though we moved very fast, we put in a lot of time and energy into researching those. And one of the things that I've tried to do is hire people who are interested in cannabis, and people, not necessarily people who are solely interested in using it, but just people who are curious and curious about it and really committed to doing what we want to do, which is make this a safe, legal marketplace.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So both of you guys talked about advocacy, and one of my questions was, how effective do you feel, and this doesn't have to apply to just cannabis, how effective do you feel social media is to advocacy in comparison to boots on the ground advocacy? Because I feel that sometimes being on social media all the time desensitizes you to some of these topics that are very important, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion.
So I'm probably going to pass this to Bill, but one thing I did want to note, and this is dodging your question a little bit, but so there's a political scientist named John Kingdon, and he has this agenda-setting model for how political organizations set their agenda. It's fascinating stuff. I highly recommend you read it. John Kingdon is his name. I can tell you that when I worked in advocacy, like understanding the framework that he showed was very effective for me developing my own advocacy plans. But I'll pass it to Bill on the other piece.
I was going to say, you're really the expert because we do advocate to you, right? It'd be interesting to say, how do we do, Although he is an implementer, not a policymaker, and we were really advocating to policymakers. Social media's got its place. I mean, I joked in the throes of one of the failures of getting the legislation out of the, I guess it was the Senate where we were stuck. I had a social media butterfly send me a direct message on Facebook with a picture of cannabis socks telling me he was 100% behind us and he's wearing his lucky socks today, and posted it on our wall. Awesome. Thank you. I think social media has a place, but it's not the only place. I mean, the effective advocacy for us, and by the way, it's also not standing with signs on people's, office lawns. Some of that was just stupid. I'll tell you what wasn't helpful, and he's a friend, and if you've heard of my friend Ed, the weed man Forcione, Ed is a great advocate, but he's got some weird stuff going on too that doesn't help. And so on Easter Sunday, when 4/20, our magic holiday, fell on Easter Sunday, walking down the street with a Jesus bong in the shape of a cross, not helpful, right? We're not winning hearts and minds with that type. So I think, as I said to you earlier before, there are people that literally live on social media, and there's a conversation to have with them, and then they can spread that word out, and that's great. But there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of lawmakers and policymakers that don't. And I think you've got to take them where they come, and then take the right people and the right messages to them, because the cannabis experiment can take people as they come. And so, but I don't want to downplay social media. It's an important tool. It's useful, but it ain't the only way. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I just brought that up because I was at a club meeting here at Rowan, and we had a guest speaker in talking about public transit and advocating for that. And a lot of what was being talked about was posting art online and messages, and it just got me thinking that you're sending out a message. Billions of people are sending out messages every single day, and I feel that if you want to make change, you got to start locally in your city council meetings and stuff like that, and be that voice that kind of opposes your 70-year-old retiree who's in there every day, just giving them their one point of view.
And I'm just going to say this to this room here. You're a very well-spoken speaker. You would be a good advocate. Some people aren't comfortable in that space. So I'm a big fan of take people where they're comfortable and let them go do things. But you can't just live in social media alone if you want to effectuate this type of change, or any type of change, whether it's a public transit system, or it's changing hearts and minds related to police issues. You can't just lob bombs on Twitter and hope that you're going to penetrate into the universe you're looking to effectuate. And I think we've gotten out of the grassroots advocacy world, and we've tried to substitute that with this sort of weird Twitter, social media space. It's useful, it's important, but it ain't the only game.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, thank you both for your service to the state. It's appreciated. I've heard mention of things like prevention in schools and getting that messaging out, and the commitment to data and making sure that that helps to inform the decisions moving forward. What is the vision for educational initiatives coming from the state? Not just to talk about prevention or talk about the dangers, but really, for some folks, going back to like a place of square one to be able to have productive conversations. In this morning's panel, we were talking about language and how even that, how we talk about it, can differ so wildly. And then depending on where the information is coming from, you're taking in all of that. And I'm wondering about how the state is going to be serving like the John Q. public in the long-term sense, as far as getting messaging to have productive conversations.
So one of the benefits to now having legal sales happening is we have tax revenue from those legal sales coming in, and 15% of all revenues by statute go into a fund called the Underage Deterrence and Prevention Fund. So that is accruing right now. I can tell you at the CRC, some of the things we're doing is talking to other state agencies, talking to other commissions about ways to partner, to get messages out, right? To equip people with what they need to be safe, to understand what's happening, to understand cannabis. I think it's so that's happening. we have created a number of safe use resources on our website, and we did that using the evidence that we had. We talked to poison control centers, and we partner a lot and talk a lot with New Jersey's Poison Control Center. And one of the things there is some of the feedback we got from people who are in that space is like if you go in with like don't use cannabis and go heavy on the like this is bad, a lot of people just get turned off immediately. And so like you got to kind of meet them where they are, and it's important to know the audience there as well. And we're going to continue to look at things that we can do at the CRC, to promote safe use, to promote, guidelines for at-risk individuals, certainly youth prevention, for us that really starts with the entities themselves. So the entities that are selling the products, and we have stringent ID requirements. There are no minors going in unless they're patients, and there they have to be accompanied by a caregiver. We have very strict advertising standards. So it's funny, if you drive over into Pennsylvania, you'll see a bunch of billboards for New Jersey businesses because they can't have billboards here. I think we're going to have to continue to look at our advertising restrictions, to make sure it makes sense and businesses can do what they need to do to market to consumers, because we do want people to convert to the legal market. But I'll share something that a former colleague said to me, it's something that I think about a lot. And he said, like, look, as regulators, we're not in the business of commercialization, we're in the business of legalization. And we have to look at commercialization and make sure it doesn't go too far. And that's something that we're certainly doing at the CRC. That's why we really leaned in on some of those advertising restrictions to start out with, because we want to convert people to the legal market. Whether it's E-Valley or other reasons, there's risks associated with purchasing untested product. So we have to establish the market here. We have to make sure that people have access to safe products, and then we have to convert them and ensure that we're, like I said before, focusing on both that 90% and the 10%. And with the 10% at the CRC, that's really working with partners, whether it's Department of Human Services, Department of Health, which is where I came from, to make sure that their people who are out on the front lines have the resources that they need.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So does that mean that in the future there will be not necessarily prevention and not geared towards children or education to make sure that everything is safe, but I just mean for an average adult that might have grown up with messaging for 40, 50 years about how dangerous this substance can be. And I'm talking education from a neutral place to just have more awareness of it as an option to start to then peel back those layers that exist so that they are getting good information that they can make informed decisions from. So not like not morning education, but just here you go education.
Yeah, and I'd say like start with the safe use, some of the resources on our website that we have already. We put together the messaging there, I think from similar place that you're talking about. Like, say, and it's interesting, if you look at data from long legal states, you do see like youth use decline a little bit in some places, but the big growth group is the 50 plus. And so I think, we need to make sure they have that guidance for how to use safely. And it starts with start low, go slow, right? Because you don't want to eat 3 edibles and then 2 hours later you're freaking out. When people ask me, I recommend starting, maybe with 2.5 milligrams and working your way up from there if you've never used before. But also, I mentioned my mom who, started out like in a place where like no to weed and ultimately voted for the referendum. She's never going to want to try it, and so I wouldn't even suggest it to her. So there are people who just aren't going to want to get into the space, and that's okay. I think there's. I said at another event recently, or I guess this was at the commission meeting. I think at the high point, it would be like 15% of the population who are using cannabis probably. You know, I think SAMHSA says it's around 8 in New Jersey. I think it's higher than that. You know, my guess is it's around 12% of New Jerseyans. And most of those people were using cannabis before we legalized, and they're going to use after we legalize. But one of the ways we make this relevant for the other, 85 or 87% of the people is what we do with that tax revenue, and making sure they know, okay, so this revenue raised from the sale of cannabis is being used to invest in XYZ. And so as that tax revenue is accruing, we make recommendations to the governor and legislature on how to spend it, and making sure that that goes to revitalizing communities. It's dedicated by statute to what are called impact zones, which are municipalities with high arrest rates historically, high unemployment, high population. And so, that's a way to keep it relevant for other people, make sure they know that, look, legalization on the balance was a positive thing, and here's the way it's impacting New Jersey communities. Yeah.
Just one other thing, because I think it's important for where we are. And by the way, I'll have a race with you on whose mom gets to do it first. My mom, not a proud parent here on this topic, can assure you, but she's come around. She's understood the value of this. In fact, my cousin, who was 39 years old, was like a fourth child to her, died in 2019 of a heroin overdose on the doorstep of his Jersey City apartment. And no one knew that my cousin was addicted to opioids. He was in a horrible car accident several years prior, was given tons of painkillers and got addicted, and no one knew. And he was buying street heroin to feed that addiction. So she got some education that way, realizing, because she called me and told me some friend of hers broke his back, and had this epiphany that he shouldn't be on painkillers. He should be on cannabis, or what did she call it? The pot, I think is what she referred to it as. So she got a little bit of that education. This conversation helps. But you guys are here to pick up some of that next. That real research that is going to be driven at universities like this, right, that are going to inform the public and inform our medical professionals, because they don't have a body of work. Jeff mentioned this. We've got now doctors recommending. They can't prescribe, they're recommending. But dosage and their familiarity with this and what types of potential cures this can be applied to, that's still very fuzzy. So you guys are here. You guys can dip a toe in this water and actually start leading to educate the public on not only is it safe, but it's effective and a better treatment. And, my mom's 76. I'm trying to get her, because she just had I'm probably breaking HIPAA violations and other things. She had a cortisone shot in her foot so she can go, what is it, paddle tennis that they play now, right? And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why don't you get a bomb? Because she doesn't want to be high. She's fine with her vodka, but she doesn't want to have the devil's lettuce. So I'm trying to do this in my life. You've done this a little bit in your life. We're all trying to do it in our lives. But if she had a doctor that said, Mrs. Caruso, maybe you shouldn't get this cortisone shot. No, you don't want to have an operation. Why don't you try a cannabis bomb? It's not going to get you high. It's just going to deal with the topical treatment, and that's going to help as pain management. Her doctor isn't doing that right now. You guys can develop some of that body of work here so that doctors, healthcare professionals, have the ability to be informed and do that. And that is going to start changing. I got what you were saying, is how do we get out of that reefer madness and into this could help you? It's not for everybody, but that number could come up, and it could be just in a medical application. It's harder right now, to go get Sudafed and get those things. It shouldn't be as hard to get this medical treatment, right? We should be able to have this like you can get these other types of drugs. So I think that's all coming. I think what we're getting to here, and the purpose of this conversation is, this is a role you guys can jump into now, and this is a place that this university can be a part of, and moreover, we still have a lot of stigma and change in hearts and minds not to go. We won a ballot question, but we didn't win the game. We didn't win the whole game yet. So, not trying to put this all back on you, but that is part of it. This is a village effort here, and you guys are a big part of this village now. Thank you.
My degree, we're considered cannabis clinicians. We're the go-between the doctor and the patient.
Yeah.
We're the ones who have more cannabis knowledge than the doctor does. In med school, it's not a topic. But our degree, master's degree, puts us in that realm where we understand the pharmacy aspect of it. It's in the school of pharmacy. And we understand advocacy, we understand the patient themselves. So we're that cannabis liaison, clinician, that the doctor will go to, that we try to also educate the people who are dispensers. So right now, the bud tender, we're trying to educate them a little bit more with the product so they know which chemivals, we don't use the word strength anymore, that they should administer to their patients based on the conditions.
We have one final question.
Sorry about that.
Mike?
Executive Director Brown, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for all of your service. And I just wanted to raise an issue that was brought in one of the other panels up to you, because I found your language to be using it very loosely and often during meetings, because you know I'm an avid watcher and listener, and I pay attention to everything that's said. The language is very important. I find that the CRC uses personal use, adult use, and recreational use as equivalent. Do you believe that they are, and do you believe that recreational should be included in that equivalence?
So I'll say the way we do that, it may not seem it, but it is very intentional. So when we're talking to like a broad audience, right? So like, say like I don't know, I don't want to say like a press release, but you got to sort of meet people with language where they are in certain circumstances. And if you go to njc.com and you go back like 12 months, and look at all their articles, they all say recreational cannabis, right? And so I think when we're in legal documents and things like that, we align with the statute, and the statute talks about personal use cannabis. Among regulators, certainly among the industry, we talk about adult use cannabis, medicinal cannabis. We try to use the language that's most effective in a particular context to getting our message across, and know that whether we're developing a video or a pamphlet for a certain population versus another might determine what how we describe adult use or recreational or personal use cannabis. I mean, the confusion extends, or something that I think about is like when we talk about the plant itself. In New Jersey, there's 4 different legal definitions for the same plant. There's medicinal cannabis, marijuana, and hashish too. So we have hashish, so it's 5, right? Hashish, cannabis, which is the legal variety, but it's all the same plants. It just depends like whether it's over there or over here, whether and what it's being grown for, and so I think is just. Like as a regulator, as part of the community that's concerned with cannabis, I think we need to continue to work on the language that we use to describe the plant. I think for us, it's like whether it's a legal document or whether it's something more so meant for general public.
Thank you.
Yep.
My apologies, one additional question.
I have a question. Can I have a mic?
Is this for me or Bill?
For both
For
of
both,
you,
okay.
actually, but
Yeah.
so hashish is not English, by the way. Just FYI.
Yeah, yep.
I can give you a history about the language. So, anyway, so I appreciate, thank you for really educating all of us on a number of things. I'm an advocate for the non-STEM area at Rowan, right? And people who know me know, you heard the pros, I have to be present, right? Because I think that this is a human condition issue, not only a medical. So we talked about a lot of the things. We talked about prevention. We talked about DEI, which is equity. You're talking about conversion to legal, and in my opinion, that's a social change. We talked about data, and data. We can give social data. You talked about language now, right? We didn't talk about law enforcement at all. And we didn't talk about how our research has to be interdisciplinary at this point, because you're dealing with this, with so many prongs of one issue. And if we do only medical research, or we do only social research, or we do only agricultural research, we'll still need to do that. We need to connect them. So I'd like to hear about what you think about law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement is struggling, and this is not the only place. I was in Canada when it was federally, became federally legal. The law enforcement people were upset, and there was this divide between the federal and the provincial, and there was a lot of problems in law enforcement itself, right? So it'd be nice to hear about your opinions, but how do we deal with law enforcement? Because as you know, law enforcement is not happy about this.
So I'm probably going to have to kick it to Bill on this, on a couple of things, but I do want to say something. So, we do, at the CRC, we do coordinate and collaborate with law enforcement partners. That includes like we have to put out reports on certain things. We're going to have to get the data from the state police to do so. We had to do that for the impact zone report. We coordinate a lot with the Attorney General's office on various aspects of the implementation of this law. Our authority is really on cannabis as it's legally defined, which is the legal variety and medicinal cannabis. But we also, are tasked with helping out, other state agencies and partners in anything pertaining to cannabis. So we do work together. I will, as far as questions of law enforcement, being in state government, I would have to defer to the Attorney General or someone from the AG's office as he's really the head of, law enforcement. But I know they've been, willing collaborators, and our experience working with the Attorney General and the Attorney General's office here has been phenomenal.
Well, I'm no longer in state government, so I don't have to defer to him. No, I'm just kidding. We spent a lot of time in the advocacy effort working with law enforcement. In fact, I mentioned at the outset here a group called Law Enforcement Action Partnership, which is a group of law enforcement professionals that from around the nation were involved in our advocacy movement. In fact, a former state trooper, and I have to say, most of the law enforcement personnel at every level that I have interacted with, and I live in Berlin Borough on a block that's affectionately called Cop Town. And we had one incident where a friend of mine who is a police officer told me that one of his colleagues who lived on my block was telling neighbors, I don't want my kids playing with him, his kids, I don't want, they're bad people. And I was crestfallen over this. This guy who was, he's like, nobody pays attention to him. We're actually with you. And the reason he was telling me this is, he goes, we're not looking to chase kids around and arrest them for this. This is stupid. This is a waste of our time. I actually had a lot of good feedback, mostly anecdotal, but from law enforcement officers, including our state troopers, by the way, that there were dutiful vigils that were present every Thursday out in front of the State House that one of the advocacy groups ran. And the state troopers, and by the way, there were medical patients allowed to consume, meaning they were smoking pot out in front of the State House. Troopers were unbelievably supportive of allowing that environment to occur and respected their rights. That said, there's some challenges, and one of which was just recent, that the question of can law enforcement engage in legal cannabis use? And it's still a kind of open question, and it really depends a lot on your own work rules. It depends a little bit on whether or not, depending on how you obtain your firearm. Certain municipalities require the officers to go get their firearms on their own, which then there's a whole issue, again, with the federal level. But I think where we are right now is law enforcement has basically said, tell us what the rules are, right, lawmakers, and then we'll enforce them. It did get a little weird for a minute in the way our law was passed. And again, we rooted in racial and social justice, rooted in decriminalization here, and we shouldn't be locking folks up for this. I'm a dad of 3 boys. When my kids do something wrong, and they do, kids do dumb things, right? We know this, right? It's my job to be the discipline with their mother. I'd rather the law enforcement not be involved. I'd rather the legal process not be involved. But I understand that my town's police officers might be involved on the front end. Our law got a little weird in the beginning because it basically took the parent relationship out of the police relationship. We made it a crime for the police to interact in that way. We fixed that very quickly because it was very controversial. I'm happy we did. I think moms, dads, guardians, grandma, whoever the adult is in that child's life must be present in it. And I do think a law enforcement interaction handed off to a responsible adult is the right move there. But I do think decriminalizing this, and I think we have more to go. My friend and colleague here offered the 6-ounce threshold. I'm mostly concerned right now, and this is not an indictment in any way, shape, or form of my colleague here, because I think he can't support this, he can't advocate for it. We don't allow patients to grow their own right now. It is the stupidest thing in the world. We've criminalized the ability for a patient to grow their own medicine that they may not be able to afford, may not be able to locate because of a strain, or what did you call it? Thank you. I will use that from here on forward. It is idiotic for the ability that every other state that's done this to allow patients to grow 6 plants or less in their home, not for public sale, just for literally so they can have their medicine. That is still criminalized right now. So we've got work still to do with law enforcement, but I've actually found mostly law enforcement to be very receptive of the new change in law and not fighting back on it. We had a couple things we've got to work through, but by and large, I think this has been a fairly good experiment, and one that I'm not sure law enforcement, I think if you talk to most cops, like, we got bigger issues to deal with than, chasing pot. Is that helpful? Super.
Thank you again. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Bill. Actually, our room has changed. We've shifted around a lot because we've had students had to leave, faculty have had to come and go, and we are streaming this, and I'm sure we're getting a large audience, and we're going to be putting this on our website as well. So we will get a larger audience. And but I would like to thank, although they're not all able to be here still, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today who have so generously given their time and expertise to help us consider the implication of New Jersey's adult recreational, I'm not going to use the whole CREMA, I'm not going down there, adult recreational cannabis legislation as we mark the 2-year anniversary when New Jersey voters approved a constitutional amendment to legalize cannabis in this state. I would also like to extend my thanks, and unfortunately they're also gone, so I'm just going to have this for the sake of our recording here. Our moderators, Dr. Joseph Johnson, a colleague of mine in the Department of Law and Justice Studies, and Melissa Weecroft, who is Rowan's General Counsel, who brought their knowledge and expertise to this event, which helped shape this to be an event that was even more educational and thought-provoking through their questions. There's a lot of people that we need to thank. We don't have the time to do so, but you know who you are. I also really want to extend a very big thanks to the Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences and the founding Dean of Rowan University School of Professional Studies, Dr. Nawal Amar, who I can't begin to say her level of help and support in getting this event and the center and everything off and running. She's really an integral part of all of this. And as director of the Social Behavioral Security and Law Enforcement Cannabis Center, boy, we all use really long names, don't we? And honestly, I don't have the mental capacity to remember all of this. If you heard our earlier one, they were talking about memory issues being part of impairment testing, and I thought, oh God, if somebody pulled me over, I've already checked off a box. It's really bad. But anyway, I want to thank our co-sponsors for this event, which is the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship. Ben Dworkin is the head of RIPAC, and he does an amazing job, has a lot of events, and was, again, very integral to helping me put this together, and the Steve Sweeney Center for Public Policy. And obviously, we want to thank everyone, those who are still here with us, those who were unfortunately had to leave sooner, and those who are streaming, to be with us today. And that we hope that this is one of many forums to come, and we certainly hope you enjoyed today's event. Thank you, safe travels home, and have a wonderful rest of your day.